Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
A stout dwarf bends over to smell a wild flower as the morning dew slowly evaporates. No more than 20 feet away, decrepit fingers break through the soil to find sunlight. A horrid undead creature pulls itself loose from the grasp of crumbling earth before beginning to make its way toward the engaged dwarf, catching his eyes. The dwarf immediately stands tall and calls out, gathering the forces of nature. In an instant, dark clouds blanket the sky. A flash of light blinds and thunder booms as lightning strikes the shambling undead, burning it to a crisp. More hands burst up across the field, peppering the landscape. The dwarf smiles before loosing an inaudible whistle. A mass of claws and teeth barrel forth from the forest. A grizzly, ferocious and terrible, carves a path through the undead as lightning continues to strike. Welcome, adventurers, and today we're talking about the Druid. This is a class that pops up quite a bit in TTRPGs, RPGs in general, video games. The Druid is pretty common. This is your nature spellcaster, masters of primal magic, fauna, and flora. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, the Druid is a full spellcaster, and it's a prepared caster, which means that not only is it going to have cantrips, it'll have leveled spells, so you'll have level 1, 2, 3, and so forth as you level up, and that you choose in the morning from any primal spells for that level. You can choose to a specific slot to fill with them. So heal, which is on the list, you could slot in as a first level spell using one of your spell slots that you will use then for heal that day. And because you're a prepared caster, if you've got higher level slots, you can choose any spell of that level or lower to put in. So I can have a third level heal if I have third level spell slots. The primal spell list has a combination of damaging spells, healing, and control mostly. There's going to be some ability to buff, but it's mostly in those areas, and there's actually a lot of damage on this list, a lot of elemental damage. So if you're looking for a damaging class, this could actually be a good choice, along with things like sorcerers and wizards. The base stat for spellcasting for druids is wisdom. That's going to be your primary ability score, which means that some things come with that for free. This means that you're going to have a good perception. And because your perception's good, you're going to get to go first in combat some of the time, which is a nice advantage to have. Wisdom also is the primary ability score for medicine, nature, religion, and survival for those skills. So keep in mind, some of those are going to feel really good to choose. Because you're a druid, you're just going to get trained in nature anyway. And then your subclass choices and all the other choices you make at first level will possibly give you some of the others. Medicine is also very strong, so keep that in mind as a skill choice. Even though you can heal with spells, it's nice to be able to heal without spells outside of combat especially. This also means that you're going to have very strong will saves, going back to talking about wisdom, because wisdom is the primary ability score for will saving throws. So all of that just comes with wisdom being your primary ability score. There are quite a few subclasses that come with the druid. While they all get, obviously, to have all the casting that comes with a druid, each of these is going to have access to different focus spells, which help you give a particular focus to what it is you want to do. So as we walk through the orders, I give you a high level idea of what they're all about. Keep in mind that they do have different niches in the team. So what are the different orders? Well, we'll start off with animal. The animal order is actually going to give you an animal companion. So if you want to have a pet, a battle pet, this is a great way to go. You become trained in the athletics skill, and you get a focus spell that lets you heal your pet. So you don't have to use your general heal spells. In fact, you just get a focus spell that you can get back between combats that allow you to heal your pet, which can be really helpful to keep them alive. Pets in Pathfinder 2nd Edition are and can be very, very strong, both attackers and tanky. So kind of a fun way to go. Adds a little complexity, but not that much. So very fun class choice. The second is Cultivation. This gives you a leshy familiar. Familiars are different from full companions. So when you've got an animal companion, this is something that's going to have probably quite a few hit points, going to have a strong AC. It's going to be meant to be up there in the face of the enemy. When you're talking about a familiar, these can go up and be in combat if you want them to be, but familiars are usually more based around spellcasting and utility. Not to say they're going to cast their own spells. Sometimes you can cast through them, or they can help augment you in some way, but they're generally more utility pets that you've got access to. So don't assume that they act the same as companions. You become trained in crafting, and you gain a focus spell to create healing food for the party. So again, some nice ways to do some healing, this time for your party rather than your pet, with just focus spells. The next is Flame. Gives you a feat to recover from persistent fire damage and breathe if you happen to be in like an ash cloud or something. You get trained in acrobatics, and you get a focus spell that creates a damaging area and difficult terrain. So very themed into fire, obviously. Next is Leaf. This is going to get the same boosts as the Cultivation gave you, except that you're trained in diplomacy instead of crafting. So again, healing food, leshy familiar. The next is Spore. Again, you're going to get a leshy familiar, but this is only a fungus leshy. You get trained in intimidation, and you get a focus spell that does an AoE debuff area for a minute. So a very different view of it. You're not trying to help out your team or heal anybody, make anybody feel better. Now you're going after the enemies, but debuffing rather than damage. All right, next up is Stone. Stone gives you stability on stone or rocky ground, so it's kind of a defensive buff to you. While others might have struggles in that area and be off guard, you won't be. You become trained in crafting, and you get a focus spell that deals damage and debuffs a single enemy. So rather than an area one like the fire, this is single, but it's a relatively strong debuff. Next, we have Storm. You get to ignore most weather effects, and you become trained in acrobatics, have a focus spell that deals damage to a single target, and potentially makes them clumsy. This is kind of more your direct elemental damage subclass. Untamed. You can change form into creatures, starting with pests and animals, and you can change using a focus spell rather than using your spell slots to do so, because while you can take other forms using spell slots, this gives you an easier way to do it. Also, when you do change using this as a focus spell, you actually get stronger abilities than you would normally get for transforming. You can get boosts to your attack that usually you don't get when you change form. And you've got another focus spell, which simply allows you to change parts of your body rather than fully changing into a different creature. You can either gain claws or resistance or glowing wings. And if I didn't mention it, you are trained in intimidation. And the final subclass is the Wave Order. You get to ignore difficult terrain in shallow water, and it helps you succeed on balance checks on shores as well. You become trained in medicine, and a focus spell transporting you on a wave, which is pretty fun. This is a great order if you're going to be playing in a water-based campaign. Otherwise, it may not be as easy to use as some of the others. I would say that the easiest for a new player just coming in and wants to feel how fun it is to be a Druid spellcaster is probably going to be Storm or Stone. You get basic damaging focus spells, and you don't have to worry about having a minion or changing form, which it takes a little more understanding to do. Beyond your order, the other thing you get to choose at level 1 for being a Druid is what's called your Voice of Nature. This is pretty small in comparison. This is just, do you like communicating with plants or do you like communicating with animals? And it allows you to use diplomacy with either one. So if I choose my animal Voice of Nature, I can now use diplomacy with animals, whereas normally you have to use nature. Whether or not this helps you, you might just be better at nature anyway, but gives you options. When you're building your first Druid, the first thing you need to think about is, what ability scores do I need? Well, Wisdom being that you're a spellcaster and that being the only primary ability stat for your class, we're going wisdom pretty hard here. So make sure that you really maximize your wisdom score. The rest of the scores I'm going to give suggestion for, but there's one caveat. So for most subclasses, it's wise then to have a decent dexterity, although you can use armor. So keep in mind that you've got proficiency in light armor, and that will help you. You're going to want some good constitution just in case you happen to get hit. You want to make sure you've got hit points. And beyond that, probably charisma, especially if you're going to want to communicate with plants or animals and you want to use diplomacy, that gives you a way to do that. Strength and intelligence are going to be less important on a druid. Because intelligent is generally what we call a dump stat, and already you don't get a lot of skills, you're not going to be heavy on the total number of skills you're trained in, but you'll still be able to be very effective with the ones you do have. The one caveat I did have is the Untamed order. Because with Untamed, you're going to use your unarmed attacks, you have the option that you can use your own attack modifier +2 instead of what the spell would normally give you for attack modifiers for changing shape. Normally that's a problem because if you dump your strength, you're not going to have a good attack modifier for those types of attacks. So my recommendation for Untamed order is still you're maximizing your wisdom, but your second stat to try to get at a +3 at level 1 would be strength. And then constitution because you need to be able to take some hits, and then dexterity after that, moving your way charisma then int. This will make you the most effective when you're up front in melee in these changed forms. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and talk about a decent level 1 build for somebody who's just entering and wants to try out the class. This is not the most effective build, not the strongest, not even the one that I would say somebody might want to play if they're looking for more versatility. It's just this is a good way to try out the class. It's a ranged caster example. All right, so for level 1, we're going to go ahead and build a simple ranged caster build. I think this will be a great way for somebody who's coming into the game to learn Druid. We're going to go with, obviously maxing out our wisdom as I mentioned, but then high dex and con. Now, while there's a lot of ways to play Druid, I do think that adding in something like a familiar or an animal companion or changing shape right away might be a little bit for somebody to have to learn. If you just want to bring them in and they really love the idea of nature magic, I suggest this kind of ranged caster design. So choosing Storm Order, a nice single target focus spell that deals good damage. It's going to feel fun and thematic to cast. When we look at our cantrips, again, if you're doing this kind of simple build to work off of, I recommend things like Electric Arc, Light, Guidance, maybe even Detect Magic, just some all-around utility things, but plenty of good damage in there too. Maybe throw in Needle Darts, if you want to theme it as wood needles rather than metal, if you care about how you theme it. For first level spells right away, I think there's some great choices. You've got a nice high damage focus spell. You've got some good cantrips. So perhaps if you want to keep it easy, go with things like Heal or Fear. These are very simple to understand how they work. They can help your team or really debuff your enemies. There's some other great choices in here. Things like Protector Tree or Summon Animal if you want just a little more going on in your turns, but also have to take a little more challenge onto yourself. So if we look at these lines, what does that mean for our kind of first and second round in any given combat? So for round 1, maybe you want to start with something like taking a move action to reposition yourself well. You're likely going early in combat thanks to your high wisdom, and then you might cast something like the Fear spell, frighten a creature, and really set it up for your allies to have good chances at taking that creature out. Another option would be just to go ahead instead of casting Fear. Maybe now's a great time to cast your focus spell from your Storm Order and deal some high damage, maybe even taking out a creature altogether. If you did choose something like Summon Animal, which is a 3-action spell, you might just want to go ahead and cast that. It'll summon a creature, and then that creature can go and take 2 actions of their own, so move and a strike, help get them onto the battlefield. When we look at round 2, if you had a summoned animal out, you're going to need to sustain it, which is again why I mentioned this is a little more complex, because you have to learn a few more rules, but for 1 action you can make it take 2 actions again, and then you still have 2 of your own. This could be a great time to either cast a 2-action heal on an ally, or shoot your focus spell out at a creature and try to deal some damage, or perhaps you just want to use a cantrip, possibly even just moving and using guidance. So some good options on round 2, really looking at what you can do by setting up a situation and then taking advantage of that situation. That's without us even pulling in any of the good options from skills, like using nature to recall knowledge and learn weaknesses of your enemies. Lots of good choices, even at level 1. So the last thing I want to say is there are some great pop culture examples for druids. I think, probably used to thinking of these types of things anyway, but when we look in, say, DC, you've got Beast Boy as a good example of an untamed order druid, or somebody like Poison Ivy, if you want more of the villain bend. I guess it kind of depends on what show you're watching these days. If you're looking more in the video game space, you've got like Cenarius and Thrall from Warcraft, and you can even have a little fun with the idea of something like, Pocahontas could be viewed as a certain type of druid even. So have some fun with your thoughts there. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this makes you want to play a druid. I hope this makes it easy to play a druid. If you do have questions, comments, please go ahead and throw them into the comment section for this video. I'll see if I can answer anything simple for you. If there's any mistakes, hopefully I catch them and I put some text throughout this video. Either way, thank you so much for your time today. And as always, adventure on.